My name is Patrick. I am the engineering chapter lead at Flybys. And this is actually my first time presenting or attending any event in Brisbane. So I'm really, really excited and happy to be here with you. Today, I want to talk to you about function calling in Gemini, which is one of my most favorite features that I have actually seen. And I realized that Susie has covered quite a lot of function calling before. I just was hoping that if we did this reverse, it may have been a little bit better. But so I guess what I want to cover today is talk a little bit about what function calling is, what are some of the benefits that it provides us. We're going to look at how it works within the Gemini framework and how we can utilize it. And then we'll look at some, I guess, practical examples of how we can make it work for us in our solutions. Now, this is not a very long talk. I'm hoping to keep it interactive. So if you have any questions, interrupt me, talk to me. Because what I have found from feedback from before is that function calling is a little bit of a tricky concept for people to understand. So I want to focus more on you understanding how to utilize it rather than me just going through content. So that's not really the intention. So before I talk about what function calling really is, I think I want to take a little bit of a different approach and talk about why do we have it? What are the challenges that we're actually trying to solve with function calling? And I'll start by saying that, well, I'm an engineer. I imagine there's a lot of developers around here in the room. And as engineers, we need consistency, right? We rely on having things like in a specific way because we want to take actions across that. But what happens when we work with large language models and everything is generative? Well, we actually have the opposite, right? We could make a call to put a prompt into an LLM and we'll get back a response. We may put the exact same prompt and get a different response. So I hate that as a developer. That doesn't help me to build a solution. I can't work with that. Also, at the same time, the content gets outdated because large language models are frozen to the time of the training. So if you ask it about, they get updated pretty quickly, don't get me wrong. But most of the time, they're kind of like a little bit frozen. And we are working in a complete sandbox. Now, Gemini, you can ask it to go out and talk to the internet, but generally, when we build solutions and do things like that, we don't have something open. So we're isolated and we're kind of like flying blind entirely. So how does this actually look? Well, do we have any soccer fans here? Wow, I should have gone with rugby. No one. Okay, great. Right, I guess this is a quick example of, of this little problem here, right? I wanted to go to, I'm from Melbourne, by the way. I wanted to go to the Melbourne Derby. I put in the query to Gemini, and it gave me back, well, I don't know what you're really talking about, right? That's not really good. I said, okay, soon, fine. I would like to see some, give me some information, some coverage about the Women's Asian Cup that's coming to Australia. Well, as you can see, the responses here is like about how Australia is poised to host it, but we already know that we're hosting it. And there was a bit of conundrum with Victoria potentially not participating. That's what I was after. Again, frozen in time, not really helpful. And what if I ask it to do something for me? I said, okay, I would like to get some tickets. I want to go to the game. Well, the response is like, go to it yourself. I can't help you with that. That's not for you. So, okay, great. Now that we understand the problem, maybe we can start talking about how function calling actually works. Or more importantly, how does it actually help with this? And going on a definition, you probably see something kind of like lengthy from Google like this, and I've highlighted the most like the most important parts. But you can think of like function, I guess like you can think of function calling as a feature of Gemini models that makes it easier for developers to get structured data out of generated models, right? And that's the three things that I talked about before. We have structured data, we have the ability to call external systems, and we have consistency with them, right? So then as developers, we can use those structured outputs to put it into our apps and like extend them or utilize them. So how does this actually look? Well, we define functions like into our systems that, we define functions that describe the functionality of the systems that we want to interact with, right? And then we pass this along to Gemini with the user prompt, or whatever prompt we're actually passing from the device. Now, the next part is quite important to understand. The model doesn't actually call these functions at all. All it really does, it utilizes them to give us back structure JSON output. Within that output, we have the suggested API or system that we need to call. And magically, this is the part that I really enjoy, we have pre-filled all the parameters for it, which grabs straight from the prompt. And then, of course, then it allows us to, pass back, I guess, like make the call, get the result, and pass it back into our prompt. I know that this is a little bit tricky. The flow may not make it a little bit easy, but let's look at it a little bit in a more simple kind of like flow, right? Functions are described using function declarations. Think of those as schema definitions. They're nothing more than a schema definition of what your system is going to be. We pass a list of those functions back into the model. The model then understands when it needs to utilize those functions and those prompts, and what the purpose of them actually is, which is the interesting part. And then it allows us to make the call. We're going to work through an example a little bit later, but I guess the flow is kind of like almost like a little bit like this. Everything that you see in the white part is handled by our app, our bot, or whatever else we're actually doing. Within the gray form is what's happening within Gemini. Sorry. It looks like I am. I have to reconnect. Sorry.
It's okay, don't worry. There's nobody else that's recording anyway.
Okay, cool.
Just keep
Cool.
going.
Perfect. Okay. So let's look at some use cases, right? Where can we actually use it? Hopefully that will make it a little bit clearer as well. So one of the things that comes to mind that is probably the most straightforward part of this is that we can enhance chatbots by connecting them to live systems, right? So they can actually now, like the Gemini model, can give us back of information. I'll run through a simple example later to demonstrate that. We can also use them for automation. We can automate assignment of work or tasks. We can incorporate them within workflows or systems that we need to execute. And of course, then we can use them for either information retrieval or for even data visualization if we really wanted to. And it goes without saying that we can use them for knowledge retrieval as well. So there's heaps of examples really essentially where every time where you need the large language model to interact with another system and perform an action, you can think of like function calling as your solution for this. So I'm moving a little bit quickly, but I'll kind of want to talk a little bit about the benefits and the things that I found that are quite interesting. So the first part is that we have full control, right? You have full control over the functions that you want to submit. You have full control of how those responses are going to be utilized. You decide which part is executed, and you decide which API calls are available to the LLM, which is fantastic. Now, we also write a lot less code because Gemini functions is built in within the Gemini framework. We don't have to do anything apart from just literally just calling it and utilizing it straight away, as opposed to building in, I don't know, an elaborate kind of like workflow or system. And less code means fast prototyping. It means that we can test things very quickly, play around with them, see how they behave, just point things to an API and see what happens. And last but not least, we have a lot of flexibility, right? So Gemini functions doesn't dictate how you're going to use it. You can use it with a web app, like in JavaScript. You can use it in a mobile app. You can use it with any framework really that you want to. And before I jump into a demo, because I think I've blasted through it entirely, I think I'll take a little pause and open up for questions. Yes?
The way this works, is it specific to each particular large language model within the Google world and outside the Google world?
Yeah, so it's actually available with the Gemini models, so you can use it with Gemini itself, or Gemini family, right, or the open source ones, which is the Gemma. No, that's all good. Does it have any side effects of using it? Yeah, so I would probably say the only limitations that you have to keep in mind for Volvo is the part that talks about that it doesn't execute things by itself, right? So you chain things. So let's think about a scenario where the user puts a prompt into a large language model. Then what actually happens is you get back the definition with the function that you want to call. If you decide to automate this flow entirely and you make the call, you may be inadvertently giving information back to the user straight away. That may not be the original intention. So control within the system is a little bit tricky, and you have to be mindful how you implement it. Yeah, that's the only real drawback. Yes.
This might be showing my ignorance, but is there any ability for the prompt of the user to influence the data between sort of giving back in JSON format?
Yes, so actually that's the entire point, right? So for example, as soon as when the user prompts for something, let's say I want to buy tickets, right? Gemini is smart enough to say, okay, the intended action is buying, and then the additional information is for there. So that's how actually the whole operation flows. Ah. No.
Yeah, almost like an SQL injection.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think so because again, like you have defined the schema, right, and you have full control over it. That's the part that actually said about before. So if you're expecting you can put rules around it and wrap it up. It doesn't take away from your standard engineering if that's what you're asking. So you can take away from it. Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Good question. I would probably see it more as complementary to that, as opposed to a replacement for what was actually talk a little bit about this, because like as you're going through that process, right, where the system is smart enough to actually start collecting all the document information in the data, if you really wanted to enhance them with something third party or even external, then you could potentially attach function calling and make it even better. So yeah, and talking about that, like because I've had the similar conversation before with RAG systems. So okay, so not the same, because in the RAG system, like you normally point it to a knowledge base that is, well, static, right? So like you enhance it with additional information, but you're not performing any live interaction or any live functionality within the RAG system itself, unless you extend it. So functions comes and complements that as well. Okay, you can have both. Yep. Yeah, so function calling is not unique to Gemini. ChatGPT has it as well. It's actually called, yeah, so function calling is actually, think about it as a Gen AI capability. At the moment, it's been made available through ChatGPT and Gemini recently, as far as I know. I don't know if there's any other models that support it. I haven't seen any. I don't think so. Yeah, I hope so, I guess. I hope so, yeah, I hope so. Cool, all right. Let's jump into a little bit of a demo.
I was going to say one thing, like it can be called function calling or sometimes tools and tool usage as well. That's this other kind of where
Yes,
on something, but
correct.
like tool calling.
Correct.
But it's the same thing.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing. So, that's not what I want to do. Zoom for me. Yeah, trying to be smart for me. All right, maybe not. Can you see? You can see it though. That's all right. Okay, that's all right. I'll leave it there. All right, I'll leave it there. So let's look at a little bit of an example, because I think I will clarify a little bit the concept a little bit better, and then we can go to the PAP. I promise I won't hold you back. So I guess let's assume that our users are financial analysts, right? And they want to interact with the bot, and what they want to do is they want to get, I guess, like financial information out of it. So in a traditional like setup, if you say like one of the analysts says like, what's the current stock price for Google? Well, Gemini will come back and say, sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't have access to the internet. That's not really my thing. Now, if we introduce function calling, what actually happens is we can utilize a third-party system that has access to that information for us. So when the call is being made, then like Gemini is smart enough to come back and say, oh, hold on a second, you need to call that external API, and the parameter that you need to pass is Google, which it took from the prompt right there. And then, of course, once we make the API call within, obviously, ourselves, and once we get back the response, importantly, we get the response, we send it back to Gemini, and Gemini is smart enough to convert this into a proper natural language response, which makes it quite interesting. Right? So let's see how this actually plans out. I'm going to link to this probably a bit later. That's actually the workshop, the workplace from Google Cloud team. They did a fantastic job, and I think it explains the concept quite well. So I reused it here. I changed it a little bit, but not a lot. So let's look at some of the, I'm not going to talk about the benefits of function calling because we talk about it, but we'll talk a little bit about, like actually what we're going to do in this workshop. So we're going to start by installing the Vertex AI SDK, well, for Python here, but there is one for Go, and I believe one for JavaScript as well, for us to do that. Then we'll define the functions to get back the financial information that we need for 2 or 3 different scenarios. We're going to initialize a chat session with the Gemini API, and then we'll we'll actually add a helper function there to chain things and execute them straight away, because otherwise we'll have to do things manually, so I don't necessarily want to do that. And then we can just just query, basically. Now, I'm not going through the steps of setting up a Vertex AI account and getting a Gemini API. I think there's quite a lot of resources out there on the internet, but I have connected a Gemini API into this workshop to connect to my account. So, because we have plenty of time, we're just going to sit here and watch it install dependencies. And hopefully I'm connected to the internet. Yes, I am. Well, that doesn't really matter, but doesn't need it. Colab has access to the internet anyway. Sorry? No. Great. So, okay, a lot of the requirements have been, have they? No, still installing. Great. Yeah.
Useful just to plug in the value type action add-on, or does it sort of broader concept that take more unstructured data coming back through the function call?
Yeah. No, you can. Yeah, it is. There's no limitation really how you use them, right? Like think about them, like almost like as having the ability to connect a live system to your app, to your LLM, right? What are the limitations with this? I can't see many. Essentially, all you're really saying is that actually I know where to get the data from a system, and this is the way for me to send that data back into the LLM, which didn't have access to it before. Cool. I'll restart runtime. The errors are intentional. Cool. You may see a few prompts here because I need to authenticate my account from Colab to Google. Yes, I will allow it. Yeah, I'm going to share my password with everyone. No, I'm not. Yeah. I agree. Great. And then I'm just going to pass in my, as I said, the Gemini key there. I have set up a Vertex AI project just for this purpose, and I'm going to import the Vertex AI SDK for us to be able to work with this. Great. Now, here's probably the part where it starts to get a little bit interesting. That was mostly set up. Now, we need, Vertex AI itself has a function declaration dependency in there that we need to pretty much put in, and also two new keywords, I guess, that we didn't talk in the presentation, which is like the part and the tool that we need to be input, and we'll see them here. Great. So let's look a little bit at the workflow of how we are going to set this up here. So we're going to define a function declarations that we set about a little bit about before. They're actually open API schema definitions, really. That's what they are, the function declarations. We're going to define 3 of them. Now we have to wrap those functions in what is actually called a tool. And then we pass all of them, like think of them a way of like bundling them all together. And then we pass the entire tool that includes these functions to Gemini along with all our prompts. So this is how the actual function declarations look like. And as you can see here, we're defining kind of like a few of them. The first one is that allows us to get the stock price that we talked about before. We give it a name and a description. The name doesn't really matter that much. But the description is important because this is how this is what Gemini looks like to figure out when to utilize that specific function. And this one, as you can see, doesn't have a lot really. It has just pretty much all it takes really is a single property that is of type string, and it's the symbol for the company that's actually blinking back. And equally, just to save us a little bit of time, we have a few more to get the company overview. Again, single kind of like parameter in. To get company news, and I guess like, like get news with sentiment is a little bit more kind of like, I guess it requires a little bit more engineering in the prompt itself so that we can get back the right information. But again, also quite simple. So I hope they're very clear, right? There's nothing really, there's no API endpoints here, there's nothing much. It's just really the schema definition of the API and the functionality that they actually provide. Now, oops, I didn't execute that. Great, and then we're going to wrap them up into a tool. We can call that tool anything really we want. And we say, great, here's your tool, and here's the functionality that we want to pass back to you. Now, you can use any kind of like system you want to. I'm using a kind of like a, semi-open source system called Haralabidis that gives me back financial information. And now, this part is really all within, I wish I could actually remove that second part here, because it's becoming a little bit tricky for you to see the function. Still clear? Yeah, good, great. So this really is the implementation within our app, right? Here I'm writing it in Python, but essentially all I really did is I said, this is the URL, the endpoint of the API that I'm actually going to call, and within the content I'm going to pass in, whatever I get from the prompt, right? And then just simple call, we'll make the call. So here's 4 specific functions within Python that do that. Nothing to do with Gemini. Now this part gets a little bit tricky. It's more of a convenience thing, but think of this as a dictionary, right? I'm mapping the function declaration to the actual Python function here so that I can use it in my code, so I can get it, so I can fish it out whenever I need to make a call of it. Great, let's go to Gemini now. Let's initialize our model, and this is standard kind of like template. There's nothing much. We're going to use Gemini 1.0 Pro. Why didn't I use 1.5? I don't know. So anyway, 1 Pro, and then we're going to start a chat session with our model. Great, cool. Now, let's talk a little bit about this again. I think we talked about it 2-3 times, but I don't mind. I think it probably enhances the concept, right? This is the actual workflow now that we're setting up within this system. Maybe I can zoom in. Yeah. This one? Where? Sorry? Within here? Oh, that's just because I'm working in a Python spreadsheet, so I can add content and information. Yeah, okay, that's a bit clearer. So here's a flow, right? The user will come in, we'll send the prompt to Gemini model. Now, within we're actually passing, obviously, the function declarations with that. Gemini predicts which function we need to call with its parameters. We're going to make the API call, depending which one of the three that we actually want to do. And once we get back a function, once we get back a response, we're going to feed it back into Gemini, and Gemini will convert it to natural language programming. So let's look a little bit at the code here. So I'm going to print out, we're printing out quite a few things to make life a little bit easier, but basically we have a simple chat message function, right? Don't worry about the display and print. I've actually done that mostly so that we can see the results as they're coming through. But essentially, what we're doing is we're just going to send a message, and then we're going to initiate a loop. I don't think we would do that necessarily in production, but here it kind of like makes sense. So I'm just going to create a loop where I'm taking like, if we are actually within the function calling scenario, I'm going to keep making queries back to get it back a new function. So we're going to fish out the function call name. We're going to extract the information from Gemini from the function and the parameters that we need to call. We're going to invoke our own Python function that makes that call for the API. And then in the end, we're going to send back the API response to Gemini to give us back the natural programming. And if there's no more function calling happening, we're just going to end it there. Very, very simple in the information, right? The only thing that you need to pay attention here is that when it comes back, you need to figure out what it's actually telling you that you need to be calling, right? That's all it is. I'm just pulling out parameters. And I'll be printing along the way so we see what actually comes up. So let's try it here now. All I'm really going to do is I'm going to send the chat message for the, sorry? Thank you. Am I actually going to get an end-to-end functional demo for the first time? Let's actually see. All right, let's send the prompt now. Like the typical example that we had, right? Send the chat message and say, what is the current stock price for Google? Hey, look at that. So our prompt was, what is the current stock price for Google? The Gemini predicted that I need to execute the get stock price, right, which is did fantastically. It told me that the information that I need to pass in as a parameter is Goog, which is grabbed from the ticker. I made the call, obviously, right? We made that call to the actual API from our function. We got back this response from the API. I didn't manipulate it in any way. I just gave it back the entire data, and it was smart enough to come back and tell me that the current stock price for Google is 186.78 as of that date. See, I didn't even have to transform my API response. I gave the entire response back, and here we are, right? Let's play with this. Anyone else wants to give me another ticker? Which one? NVIDIA. What is the ticker now? NVDA. N. Oh, N. Sorry. NDA. Thank you. There we go. We got the prompt, and there you have it. So, like that, like, and I can keep going, right? We have a few more examples. You could, so this got nothing to do really with how Gemini and function callers work, but if the system has that capability in, right, the external API that you do, yes, absolutely. So whatever your system supports, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So at this point in time, I'm only kind of like giving it back and say, just respond with a natural language kind of like for this response, but you kind of like get to see this, right? And then, we can kind of like keep going, right? We can call another part of our system and say, give me a company review of Google. And this was just all natural. See, I didn't get the full function. So, what happened? Oops, sorry. Simple Google description. Try it again. I'm not sure why I didn't complete. No, okay. The model did not complete successfully. See? I wonder why. Well, I jinxed it. I thought I'm going to get a fully functional end-to-end, but I'm not sure why. It definitely goes out and gets Google, but I'm not sure why it kind of like complains about. No, yeah, I can't figure it out. Sorry.
Patrick, I don't think that I'm having issues because last night I was having issues with Gemini giving me weird security errors and this type error in a different context.
Yeah,
I think they changed something recently and it's gotten way too locked down.
but it could be. Yeah,
I
it
had a
could be.
similar error last night as well.
It could be, right? Like, let's see. Like,
I don't think it's your code.
can I crush it one more time? Okay, well, there you go. It could be something like that, right? So essentially now we kind of like said, okay, give me an overview of, yeah, so,
What happens if, like, at the moment you've got the currency conversion, like USD, what would happen on first prompt if the user was to say, can you give me, what the current stock price of Google is in Australian dollars?
not a problem. As long as your system again supports it, because Gemini itself, right, it's all driven by your own API and capability. So essentially in that function, if you were doing this, in the function declaration that we passed in, you would have two parameters, which would be the currencies, like the USD and AUD that you wanted to support. The language model does nothing but understands what the user query is, which function it maps to, how to populate that function, and how to convert whatever JSON response it got back into natural language. So think of this, that's why kind of like in one of my previous slides, I don't know if you remember, right, when we're talking about the flow, all that Gemini does is natural language understanding. Everything else about the functionality is from our own systems. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so I don't see why not. Yeah. It all depends as well. Like, the response now for, I don't know if it was in the code, but probably, I don't know if I glossed over it. But here, there is a definition here, right, in the prompt. My prompt is like, give a concise high-level summary. Only use, the information that you learn from the API responses. So you could make it as elaborate as you want to, or as tricky as you want. No, no, not yet, not yet. Like, because, like for me, it's kind of like makes sense a lot for stuff like, like help desk support, because we have a lot of members. So when they put in requests in, I'd love to automate it and give them back responses straight away, rather than just a simple FAQ, for sure. And internally within, within the team, potentially even our development workflow, if we have like, like a lot of kind of like tickets and work coming through, we could just automate the allocation for them. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you can do that. As a matter of fact, I did data visualization even there before, because I think, like, like from a more interesting scenario that I was kind of like tinkering a little bit with is actually put it on top of BigQuery. So, you could have a lot of, organizational data, but then your stakeholders or your, like your management are not necessarily data scientists or developers, right? What if you could have Gemini on top of your, well, it doesn't have to be BigQuery, and on top of any database, really. And then you have the SQL definition there. So essentially, the member could, your executive could say like, which, product was the highest selling in the organization this month. Gemini would, pretty much generate the SQL query for you, pre-populate the SQL query for you, execute it into your database, convert the result from the database into that. So suddenly you can start talking to your database or to your systems directly with Gemini. That's where the power is. Yes. Oh, good. That's what I was hoping for, by the way. That's great. So it depends. So I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but you know how we put the function declarations, right, within the tool? That's how you control it. You only give it the ones that you wanted to have available. If you wanted to go to one of them specifically, right, over another, if you have a couple that are similar, you can control that to a degree with the description. Yeah.
I think, sorry, just to add on that, I think you can make it only return a function prediction or nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to, I think what you've got it set up with there, it could like not come with a function, just return a text response as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, here it would went.
Like, cut the text response if you want to, if there's a setting for that.
Yes, correct. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, essentially yes, you could do that. Yeah.
In summary, we managed successfully to control engineering as much as we talk to the expert perspective, you control and narrow down to this hallucination.
Yes, correct. That's what it is. And
Roll the corner possible.
correct. And also access to systems, live data, information that it didn't have in the first place. Well, the hallucination. Okay, where can the hallucination come into this solution? It can come only on the final part. Sorry if I scroll down here. When we executed this kind of like first example, right? Where we had this natural language response, which said the current stock price for NVIDIA is blah, blah, blah. That's all generated for the model. It could. Yeah. Yeah. Any other? Yes. Multilingual as in the prompt from the user. I wonder, does Gemini support multiple languages? I think yeah, it does. So I don't think that it's all built in, right? You don't have to do anything on top of that. Okay. I see your question. That's a good point. I imagine then you may have to define it multiple times at this point in time. What? We've got code. Want to try it? I can't speak, like I don't know, like maybe I can. Or if you want another language, you'll have to come in and help me because I'm hopeless. Yeah, why not? Come on. Come on. I'm curious now as well.
I actually discovered recently that the ChatGPT app, I haven't tried this in any of the Google apps, but I assume they'd be similar. ChatGPT can actually seamlessly handle you speaking in different languages for the text prompting part of it. Yeah.
I only sound Spanish.
He's asking what's the word for stock in Spanish. Okay, yeah. But it's interesting when you speak different languages into the actual, sorry. Yeah, it'll figure it out. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing how it can do that in the same way that a person who can speak many languages would.
What did we get? That was the prompt. It still predicted the function, right? It doesn't matter. It still predicted the function, but it gave me back a response in English. So, I mean, that's quite interesting. Look at that. Yeah, but the fact that it still understood the question is interesting to me. So. In the language responded, maybe, yeah. Give a concise, high-level summary. I don't think it will. I'm not optimistic, but. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Eddie, I don't know. I'm not sure how we're going with time, but I know I'm between us and the pub. I said it before. That's not a good spot to be in. So, if no other questions, thank you so much.